Hi! I'm Barb.
And I'm Alex.
And we're Enchanterium. In today's video, we'll be customizing another smart doll into a pre-Halloween doll, a pastel-loving vampire. Let's get started. To be frank, we went a little crazy purchasing smart dolls over the summer, so let's watch me unbox this beauty on a park bench on a lovely day a few months back. We always like to shop at the Chaos outlet when we get a parcel from Japan, and you know you do this too. Add stuff to the cart cause you're only a few dollars away from free shipping. We got a few outlet wigs and some blank heads for customizing, of course. You can already see from the color of the stand in the box that this time we got a doll in the shade of cocoa. We have 4 cinnamon dolls already, so we thought if anything we would get a darker doll next. It just so happened that my favorite one of them, Ruby, was restocked, so I jumped on the opportunity and ordered her right away. You can see how excited I am to finally hold her in my arms, and I haven't even fully unpacked her to appreciate her beauty. Ruby, say hi! I love how the red in her hair complements her eyes and complexion, and her rosy cheeks are so cute. We only own one other original Core to Japan face-up, my first doll, Genesis, and our interest lies more in the customizing of dolls, not collecting, but she is just so cute, oh my god!
We have one more unboxing today. Zazou dolls sent us some smart doll wigs to try out. We picked 2 wigs from their website to fit this project, but Zazou was kind enough to send us 2 extra ones. They got stuck in the customs office for a while, but they arrived just in time to be included in this video. They are all nicely packaged in a protective mesh fabric and a plastic bag. One of the wigs we picked is this pink to blue pastel long wig that may look really good on our colorful pastel vampire. It has a beautiful wave to it and it's really soft. Our custom doll crush will be a perfect model for this one. Our next pick is a short hairstyle with curly afro hair. We chose it because this kind of hair will be very difficult to make by hand and we like having a variety. We also know that a black character like our vampire will look good in this hairstyle, so the choice was obvious. I'm sure that today's star Ruby is going to rock this hair. The curls are very tight but also stretchy and easy to style. One of the surprise wigs is this almost black navy blue bob. I think I would prefer it a little bit shorter, but it's always better to have long fibers and trim them as you like. Our custom doll Mori recently got a new wig from the Culture Japan store, but it won't hurt if she changes it for a while. These fibers are a bit curled, so they create a nice shape around the face. And the last one, and my personal favorite, is this mossy green short tomboy style wig. I love this color so much, it's one of my favorite colors, and I'm sure our girl Aqua will look good in it. I had to trim the bangs a little bit, but other than that, it looks fantastic. Look at them together! I certainly had a lot of fun trying to restyle them, and I think they look great in their new wigs. If you're looking for smart doll wigs, I can recommend checking Zazou's website and Etsy shop. They have a lot of styles and colors to choose from. You already know my personal favorite, but Barb is obsessed with the curly one. Thank you Zazou dolls for sending these to us. Now let's get into customizing our Ruby.
I'm starting this outfit with a simple pair of shorts, following the free pattern from the Smart Doll website. I'm cutting 2 of these pattern pieces, mirrored, out of a stretchy jersey fabric. You can see that I extended the waistline up a little bit to make them a bit more high-waisted. I identified the front center seam and stitched it together. Then, to finish the waist, I'm using a piece of elastic, which I attached to the wrong side with the zigzag stitch first, stretching it to match the length of the seam. Next, I fold it over to the wrong side and zigzag again to get a nice finish. I used the same finishing method for the leg holes, and you can see that I'm using a walking foot, which makes the process of sewing stretchy things much easier. When the hems are finished, I put the shorts right sides together and sew the center back together. I fold the seam allowance to one side and stitch it down to make it lay a bit more flat. The last part to sew is the crotch seam and our pants are ready. I made a tube top to match, but it was a bit too tight, and yes, black fabric that is tight on the doll is never good. There was some light staining on the bust, so I decided to make a different lined top to avoid further damage. That's a lot of damage. I'm cutting the lining out of white cotton and the main part of black cotton. I'm cutting one leg of the dart in the pattern to make it easier for me to mark it on the pieces. I pin all the darts in place and sew all of them on all of the black and white pieces. Make sure that the seams are not matched up at the edge but where the sewing line is, to avoid staggering of the top edge of the finished piece. The lining and the main part are the same, and I basically just attach them at the side seams, making sure to leave a gap for turning on one of the seams of the lining. The rest is sewn all the way through. I top stitched the seam allowance on the outside black part and trimmed it up a bit since my pattern was not exact. I will use the silver zipper for front closure, but I need to trim it down. But before I can do that, I need to add some stoppers so the zipper pull doesn't fall out. I simply do a couple of stitches where I want the zipper to stop. That will prevent the pull from falling off. Remember not to use your fabric scissors to trim the zipper. The fabric scissors are sacred. To attach the zipper to the center front, I will be using a zipper foot. First, I'm just basting the zipper to the black part, pretty far away from the teeth, and then doing a second pass closer to the teeth when the zipper is not sliding all over the place. It should look like this when both sides are attached. The lining can now be placed right sides together on the main part, and the whole contour of the blouse can be sewn. I start this by sewing over my zipper stitch line to make sure everything will work properly after turning. Then I stitch the bottom edge, and finally, the top edge. Since we left a hole in the lining, we will be able to turn this around to the right side. Before I turn it over, I trim the seam allowances with pinking shears to reduce some of the bulk. Now we turn over and poke out all the corners and give it a good press. The side seam of the lining can be neatly tucked and hand sewn shut. And to make sure the lining is not poking out, I top stitch the top and bottom edges. Let's try it on. Looking good! Moving on, I want to do a kind of a skirt, but it's not going to be a full-on skirt, maybe 3/4 of the way around, to have the shorts peeking through. I took a pink, purple, and blue cotton and cut it into strips. You can already see that it's a second version of the skirt because the old one is in the background. I cut narrower strips of black, and I'm going to attach them to the colored ones along the long edge. Then I attach the strips together into a long piece that will be our pleated skirt. I press the hem evenly, and this is one of the reasons I'm remaking the skirt. Instead of sewing the hem, I'm using a double-sided fusible tape to finish this edge, so there isn't a stitch line on the bottom. Very neat. I can now start pleating the colorful panels by folding them in a way that covers the black strips. I used the tape to hem the sides of the skirt and secured the pleats with a stitch close to the edge. To finish the waist, I'm using a piece of cotton cut on the bias to act like a waistband and a closure. I attach it from the wrong side first, sewing in one of the grooves of the tape. Then I fold it over to the right side and sew along the whole length of the tape, stitching it down to the skirt and to itself where it sticks out. On the short side, I added 2 D-rings and folded the tape to the wrong side to secure them. The better and improved skirt is ready!
I couldn't stop myself from buying some hats from the Chaos outlet page on the Smart Doll website. This time we got one in cocoa, so let's use it for this project. I don't see any major issues with the surface, and I'm going to prepare it by removing the casting leftovers. I'm using an X-Acto knife to cut it, and I think it will be easier to do it when the hat is warmed up, but I didn't think about it at that moment. Same with the eye molding. I wish I thought about heating the head, because believe me, this vinyl is hard. I decided to use a Dremel tool to even out the edge. It took a lot of time to smooth out all the imperfections, but the eyes are the windows to the soul, so I had to make it look as good as I can. Then I sanded it down with some paper attached to a brush. I think I did a good job because the difference between before and after is huge. To prepare the head for customization, I sprayed it with 2 coats of Mr. Super Clear Matte Sealant. It makes the pigment stick to the surface, and you can add more color with every layer. I'm starting with a black pencil and wing liner, but I didn't like the wing, so later I removed it. She's going to be a vampire, so she needs some cute little things. I'm taking my pink and black pastels and doing some eyeshadows with it. Bright pastels don't really show on darker complexions, but I want just a hint of pink to make her skin look more warm in tone. Now when I have a black base, I can add a colorful detail. I'm drawing a white line just above the black liner and going down for a cat eye look. I'm also enhancing the lower lashes by drawing white lines next to the black ones. Off camera, I filled the waterline with pink, and after spraying the doll with another layer of MSC, I can make the line really pop with acrylic paint. She's going to have a lot of pinks, purples and blues in her outfit, so to marry the face with the rest of the design, I'm adding a bit of these colors to the white line. Now I have to remake those lashes that I painted over before, but that's not a big problem. They kind of peek through, so I'm glad that I have a guide. I was not sure what to do with the brows and what expression I wanted. I tried a few times, but decided to keep the pointy ones. I'm adding a bit of detail to the skin and to the eye crevices with brown and white pencil. It makes the face look more interesting and a bit more realistic. Of course, we're not going for realism on this doll, as she has very anime-like features. But I like to add some details that make the face look more 3D. We all know that vampires have sparkly skin, and she's no exception, so I'm adding a lot of Perlex powder on her cheeks.
Since our little vampire loves pastel colors so much, I'm going to make her a big fur bomber jacket. I'm using a pattern by My Little Doll Story. I'm sewing this according to the instructions, starting with the shoulder seams. I made the mistake of not trying this pattern out on an easier fabric first, and the fur made it difficult for me to basically even see what I'm doing. So the final result is not as perfect as it could be. I'm using a spritz bottle with water to help brush out the fur and make it lay flat. The color gave me the most trouble, and I attached it here, but it looked like crap. I revisited it later after I looked at it for weeks and hated it, so you'll see it looks much better in the final pictures. I attached the cuffs to the sleeves and attached the sleeves to the bodice. The construction of the jacket itself is not that complicated, but the fur... I'm so glad I used up most of it, because there's a smaller chance I'll be able to use it again, which means less annoyance for me. As with every shirt-like garment, the next step is the side seams and the sleeves. There were fur particles flying everywhere, and I had a lint roller on standby at all times. I added the bottom ribbon to the furry and faced my biggest enemy in this jacket, the zipper. This one is a coil type zipper, and I had trouble shortening it. I wanted to preserve the metal stoppers at the top, but got frustrated and used the same method as for the shirt, where I added the stoppers by sewing around the coils. Looking back at this, I should have added a piece of fabric along the edge before adding the zipper, so the fur wouldn't get stuck in the zipper as it goes up and down. Or at least sew the zipper not as close to the teeth. But you know, the hindsight is always 20/20. Don't get me wrong, the zipper works if you try hard enough, but there's always room for improvement. Not that I'm planning on making another fur jacket anytime soon. Now that we have all of that, it's time for the lining. It doesn't have the sleeves, so the only thing to do here is the shoulder seams and the side seams. Then we can attach it to the main fur part, right sides together, and sew along the bottom ribbon. The next step is getting frustrated at the fur again, and stitching the lining to the zippers, making sure to follow the stitch line from before. I love lined garments, but there's a lot of extra steps which I have not practiced enough yet, compared to just making unlined stuff for Monster High dolls. But hey, I love a good challenge, and the end results are usually worth the hassle. After some confusion and some more stitching, which at this point I'm not even sure what I'm doing here, and some Enchanterium no jutsu, I think we can flip this thing over through the opening in the neckline. I hope you're enjoying my curly hair in the frame as I'm turning the lining under and stitching it down by hand. The sleeves get a trim, and the lining is attached to the armhole seam allowance. And when that's done, with a big sigh of relief, the jacket is mostly finished, except for the collar, which I fixed later, and a bit of a haircut. Let's accessorize. I'll be making a fishnet stocking for one side using a pattern by Tatiana from Motivation. I first finished the top edge by adding an elastic, similarly to how I hemmed the shorts at the beginning. Then, I pin the pattern to the fishnet, and since it will be hard to trace, I just keep the pattern there for the sewing, trying to follow the shape as close as I can but not pierce the paper too much with the needle. The excess can be trimmed, and the sock is done. Simple, huh? I made another sock for the other leg, this time out of solid fabric. Next thing on my mind is a coffin-shaped purse. First, I made a strap for it by threading a leather cord through a chain. To make the body for the purse, I used some black paper, onto which I glued the stencil of the coffin. We're basically making a box here. I scored the fold lines with tweezers and glued the tabs down. I don't usually use my wonder clips for sewing because they're too big for doll stuff, but they come in very handy for clamping stuff together. I added this strip to the inside of the purse to make sure it can't be squeezed down too easily, which I tried to demonstrate by punching it a bit too hard, but it works for the most part. For the outside, I'll be using some faux leather. I first cut a strip to cover the sides of the purse. I glued this piece all around the box in 2 stages. To make sure the glue bonds everything together, I used some small rubber bands to act as clamps. To make the front and backs, I traced the purse onto paper and straightened the edges, adding a few millimeters to each side. I glued the paper down to the leather and cut it out with some extra on the side to wrap around the edges of the paper. The clips were an essential part of this step too. On the front of the purse, I wanted to add a cross, as I thought it fit the vampire / a bit goth aesthetic we were going for. I cut it out of this iridescent snakeskin pleather. With some super glue, I added strips of the same black leather to have some anchor points for the strap. I added jewelry rings to them before I glued the other side. To make sure the front and back stick to the purse real good, I used plenty of glue and held the purse down for a few moments. And lastly, I redid the strap with the iridescent leather to better match the other iridescent elements. And speaking of them, these are the shoes I'm going to use for the project, and to customize them a bit, I will add a bat wing thingy that will thread through the laces. I'm not sure if these types of decorations have a name. I cut these out of the iridescent vinyl, and with my crocodile, I made holes for the eyelets. This tool is awesome and easy to use for smart doll-sized eyelets. I decided that the blue ones would look the best and added them with the punch tool. To make sure the back of the wings looks nice too, I glued more vinyl there and trimmed the excess. This is how it's going to be laced up after Alex adds some finishing touches. To complete the look, I made a simple choker with this moon pendant and glued a belt from the iridescent vinyl to the skirt. This is how she turned out. I love the curly afro wig on her. I had a hunch it would look great the moment I saw it in the Zazou catalog. If you want to check out their smart doll wigs, the link to their shop will be linked below. We decided to name her Dawn, and she's been a project that actually underwent a lot of changes, but we ended up going to the first original design in the end anyway. I hope you like her as a pre-Halloween treat, and we hope to pull out some tricks for the proper Halloween celebration video in a few weeks.
There isn't a lot of vampires of color in media, so we hope you like this little representation from us. Do you like vampire stories? Or maybe you had a crush on Edward 15 years ago? Let us know in the comments down below. If you know me, you know that my favorite vampire story is, of course, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram for some sneak peeks and subscribe for future videos. Have an enchanted day, and we'll see you next time. Bye! We decided... Stop, pozapomniałam jak ją nazwałyśmy!